Imagine if a random stranger just walked into your town, declared himself in charge, and started giving out orders, and everyone just went along with it. It might sound like fiction, but this is exactly what happened in 1906, and in a way, is still happening today. I'm Jack, this is Curiosity Squad, and today we're going to look at the heist that changed psychology forever. It's a calm, crisp autumn day in Copenhagen, Germany, and a Prussian army captain walked confidently down the street, and people snapped to attention. This man is named Wilhelm Voigt, and despite his official appearance and pressed uniform, he's not actually a captain. In fact, he's not even in the army at all. In reality, he's a Prussian shoemaker and con artist with an extraordinary plan that will change history. It's October 16th, 1906, and Voigt has just walked into Copenhagen like he owns the place. He then walks straight up to a group of soldiers and orders that they follow him. And they do. No questions asked. These guys are trained to follow orders, and Voigt does look the part. So off they go, marching through town like it's just another day in the Prussian army. Voigt and his borrowed troops march straight towards the town hall. He bursts in, finds the mayor, George Langerhans, and promptly declares, "You're under arrest." And the mayor doesn't resist. He doesn't even ask why, he just complies. But Voigt isn't done yet. He demands access to the town's safe. And wouldn't you know it, they just hand the keys right over. Voigt walks out with over 4,000 marks. That's nearly $250,000 in today's money. Now, let's take a step back and think about this. How did no one question Voigt's authority? I mean, come on. A random captain just turns up in town, arrests the mayor and empties the town's coffers. And everyone's just like, yep, seems legit. It's hard to believe it actually happened. And you might be thinking, well, it was over a century ago. We're smarter now, right? But that just isn't true, as similar things are still happening today. Take the 1994 to 2004 McDonald's hoax, for example. We'll get into details later, but let's just say it involved a fake cop, some very real consequences, and a whole lot of people who really should have known better. So what's going on here? Why do we keep falling for these tricks? Is there something about a uniform that just short-circuits our brains? Or perhaps is it the confidence? Well, maybe the truth is that perhaps it's a bit of both. Think about it. When was the last time you actually questioned the authority of someone wearing a uniform? The security guard at the mall, the flight attendant on your last trip. We tend to assume that if someone looks the part, they must be legit. And that's exactly what con artists like Voigt count on. But it's not just about the clothes, it's also about the attitude. Voigt walked into Copenhagen as if he'd been in authority there for years. He gave orders with confidence, and people just followed them without hesitation. It's like there's some unwritten rule in our heads that goes, if they sound like they know what they're doing, they probably do. Now that we've seen how easily people can be fooled by a confident-looking person wearing a uniform, we're going to turn our attention towards the science of why people are so quick to follow orders. You might think that you would never fall for Voigt's trick, but the science suggests a different story. This is Stanley Milgram, a psychologist who is fascinated by why people obey authority. In the 1960s, he set up an experiment that would quite literally shock the world. Milgram told volunteers that they were part of a study on memory and learning. Their job was simple, to test another person's memory by asking them questions, and then, whenever they got a question wrong, giving them an electric shock. But here's the twist. The person getting shocked was actually an actor, and they weren't really getting zapped. But the participant didn't know that. They sat in front of a big machine that had switches labelled from 15 volts to 450 volts, which is enough to potentially kill someone. As the experiment went on, the actor would begin to complain about the pain. They'd yell, plead to be let out, and even mention that they had heart problems. But the guy in the lab coat running the experiment would just keep calmly telling the participant to carry on. The experiment requires that you continue, he would say. Now you're probably thinking, no way would I keep shocking someone if they were screaming in pain. That's what most people say when they hear about the study. But 65% of people went all the way to 450 volts. Let that sink in for a second. 2/3 of the people were willing to seriously harm or even kill someone just because some guy in a white lab coat told them to. But it's not just about blindly following orders. There's something called incremental compliance at play here as well. Milgram's shock machine had 30 settings, each one just 15 volts higher than the last. It's hard to object to someone giving someone just a tiny 15 volt shock. But once you've done that, what's another 15 volts? And another. Before you know it, you're at dangerously high levels. This is how people can end up doing things that they never thought themselves capable of. It's not one big leap, but rather a series of small steps. Each one doesn't seem that bad on its own, but together they add up to something major. Milgram's research was influenced by the Holocaust. He wanted to understand how ordinary people could commit such horrific acts. The results suggested that it's not about people being inherently evil, but rather about the power of authority and the psychology of obedience. And modern versions of the Milgram experiment have found similar results as well. So what does this mean for us? Are we all just puppets, ready to do whatever someone in authority tells us to? Well, not exactly. Knowing about this tendency is the first step in resisting it. When we understand how our brains work, we can catch ourselves before we fall into these mental traps. We've seen how people can follow orders from authority figures, even when those orders are questionable. But there's another factor at play here as well: our emotions. Whenever we're scared, angry, or excited, our brains don't work in the same way. These emotional states, often called hot states, can make us far more susceptible to manipulation. Think about a time when you were really stressed out. Maybe you had a big deadline at work or school. In that moment, did you make the best decisions? Probably not. That's because stress, fear, and other intense emotions can cloud our judgment. They hijack our rational thinking and push us into fight or flight mode. Now, let's circle back to that McDonald's hoax I mentioned earlier. This was a string of prank calls that culminated in a man calling a McDonald's restaurant in Kentucky claiming to be a police officer. He told the manager that one of the employees had stolen from a customer. Then, over the phone, he instructed the manager to strip search the employee. You're probably thinking, no way would anyone actually do that. But they did. The manager followed the caller's instructions step by step. The fake police officer kept escalating his demands, and the manager kept complying. This went on for hours and resulted in serious harm and mental distress to the employee. How could this happen? Well, put yourself into the manager's shoes for a second. You're suddenly thrust into a high-pressure situation. Your heart's racing, your palms are sweaty. You're terrified of doing the wrong thing, of getting in trouble with the law. In that emotional state, your critical thinking skills take a backseat. And this is where the McDonald's hoax and Voigt's con overlap. Both exploited people's tendencies to follow orders without questions, especially in high-pressure situations. Voigt faked urgency by acting like a military officer on an important mission. The fake officer in the McDonald's case used the fear of legal consequences to manipulate the manager. In both cases, the victims were placed into emotional hot states that made them more likely to comply with unreasonable demands. When we're emotionally charged, we're less likely to stop, take a minute and go, does this make sense? But this doesn't just happen in extreme situations. We make decisions in hot states all the time. Ever bought something that you didn't really need just because the salesperson told you it was the last one in stock? That's the fear of missing out, another hot state influencing your decision. Or think about those times you've said something in the heat of an argument that you later regretted. That is your emotions taking the wheel, overriding your normal filters and decision-making processes. So what can we do about this? Are we just at the mercy of our emotions? Not quite. Just as with authority, the first step is awareness. Just knowing about these hot states and how they affect us can help us to recognize when we are actually in one. Whenever you feel your emotions running high, that is probably a good time to take a step back and ask yourself, am I thinking clearly right now? But as well as authority and emotions, there's yet another factor at play here as well: appearances. Specifically, how the way someone looks can influence our perception of someone's authority in extreme ways. Let's start with something you might not expect: height. Studies have shown that taller political candidates are more likely to win elections. Yeah, you heard that right. Apparently, it's not just about policies or qualifications, but we're all secretly voting for the tallest kid in the class. Now, let's talk about uniforms. There's something about a person in uniform that makes us sit up and pay attention. It's like our brains have a switch that flips whenever we see someone in an official-looking outfit. Suddenly, we're far more likely to follow orders without question. This is what psychologists call the uniform effect. It's why Voigt's con worked so well. He wasn't just confident and authoritative, but he truly looked the part. That Prussian army captain's uniform was the key to his whole operation. It's like he put on the costume of authority and everyone's brains just went, "Yep, looks right, better do what he says." But why do uniforms have this effect on us? Well, it's partly because they're designed to. Uniforms are meant to signal authority, competence, and trustworthiness. They're like a visual shorthand for, this person knows what they're doing and they have the right to tell me what to do. Think about it. Whenever you see a police officer, a doctor, or even a McDonald's employee in their uniform, you automatically make assumptions about their role and status. You don't stop to question whether that person wearing scrubs actually went to medical school. You just assume that they know more about medicine than you do. This automatic trust in uniforms can be useful. It helps society to function smoothly if we can quickly identify who's in charge and who to go for help. But, as Voigt showed us, it can also be a vulnerability. Con artists and manipulators can exploit this tendency to get people to do things that they normally wouldn't. So what can we do about this? Are we doomed to be fooled by anyone who puts on a fancy hat? Not necessarily. I know I sound like a broken record, but once again, the first step really is awareness. Next time you find yourself automatically deferring to someone wearing a uniform, take a minute to ask yourself, am I making assumptions based on their appearance? Should I be asking for more information or credentials? It's not about becoming paranoid or distrusting everyone in a uniform. It's about finding a balance between respect for legitimate authority and having the right amount of healthy skepticism. After all, most people wearing uniforms are exactly who they say they are, but it doesn't hurt to verify, especially in unusual situations. Remember, Voigt's victims weren't stupid, they were just human, with the same cognitive biases that we all have. By understanding these biases, we can be better prepared to resist manipulation in the future. So what have we learned? Well, turns out our brains can be pretty easy to manipulate. We're wired to follow authority, even when it doesn't make much sense. Our emotions can hijack our thinking, even in stressful situations, and we're often suckers for a nice uniform. But knowing about these quirks of human behaviour is the very thing that can help us spot when someone's trying to trick us in the future. If you're ever faced with an authority figure making weird demands, take a breath. Ask yourself, does this make sense? Am I thinking clearly? Or am I just reacting to the uniform? Remember, you are the captain of your own ship. Don't let another Voigt take the wheel. This was not a particularly evil crime. However, there have been others who have used this facade of authority for some truly horrific purposes, including the story of the most prolific serial killer of all time. If you'd like to know more about that, we made a video all about it, which you can watch by just clicking here. This has been a story all about reclaiming your independence of mind and making your own decisions. And on that subject, if you've liked this video, it would be amazing if one of the decisions that you could go on to make would be to either like, to share, to comment, or subscribe. I'll see you next time.